All right. Good morning. It's Thursday, and it's my weekend starts kind of. This is my Friday since I don't work at the Stone Company on Fridays, and so anyway, life is good, and had a great night last night, and enjoyed enjoyed hanging out with some guys and just talking about life and growth and what it means to be men who live better men make better lives, and so we've been focusing on that, and had a good night last night. So that was enjoyable. Today, donut day. That's my guys at work, and so I'll be heading out of here and go get some donuts and get to work, do a safety meeting, and then continue doing what I do. And it's kind of life today. But the weekend is here, and so it's a good thing, right? So hey, listen, let's just jump back into 1 Timothy. We're in chapter 3, verse 3 today, getting through that. And I know we're maybe lingering a little longer in these. I just think they're valuable traits that we ought to look at, not so much as it relates to pastor, elder, bishop, but because they're qualities that you and me should really have in our own life as well. And so today, as I was working through some of the language and format and structure of it, you realize that sometimes character is more about what we're not than it is about what we are. And I don't mean that what we are isn't important, but sometimes and you'll see as we let this flow, sometimes character is because we're not something. And I think it's important that we look at it and that we see it. So we're in the section where Paul is trying to straighten out with Timothy the things that in the church that need to be addressed. And he's specifically speaking of order in the church. So he's worked through some of these things about the roles of men and women. Now he's looking at the role of leadership. These are the things that he says, I want you to know how you conduct yourself in the household of God. And so these are the things that we look at. So we've seen the fact that he is to be above reproach, right? A leader in the church isn't because he won the most vote, or he's the most popular, or he's got the most money, or he's the whatever. It has nothing to do with those things. It has everything to do with whether or not the Spirit of the living God has drawn that man to the ministry, called him out, appointed him for that task. And we speak very little about that. We just assume that we rush people into, Bible college, seminary, whatever it is. And some people are bypassing that even today. If they can just, get a worship leader and draw a crowd somehow, they can call themselves a pastor. But it should really be because the Spirit of the living God has drawn that person to that focus and to that work. And it is a work. It's a work. And so that's why it's essential that we take time to slow down to see that. And so if someone aspires to that office, then you look at them. There's a job description, and it's all about character. And so this is what we're looking at, the job description really for an elder, for a pastor, for a bishop. They are to be above reproach. That is, that they should have a character of such that if you look at the history, the body of their life, then you say, no, I don't see much flaw in there at all when it relates to glaring nuisances and character flaws. They are above reproach. You're not going to be able to just throw anything at them and people would believe it. They're just they're a money grubber, or they're all in it for themselves. If those things can stick on that person, they're not above reproach. But if somebody goes, nah, you're an idiot for thinking that, they're above reproach. And so this is how that works. So they're blameless, above reproach. That's one of the concepts. We saw in terms of the fact that they are wholly devoted to their wife. We looked at what it wasn't. It doesn't mean that they were never married. It didn't mean that they were divorced and remarried. It means that they're wholly devoted to their wife. They have a track record of such that they are not just married, but wholly devoted in that marriage. They are all in that marriage, and how they treat their wife, and how they respect their wife, and how they lead their wife. All of that matters. And then he says, not just wholly devoted to one woman, but then we move into the fact that they are temperate. That is, that they are balanced. Right? We saw about self-control, that they're steady in life. They've kind of got a regulator, like a diaphragm in their the highs and lows of their emotion and all of that is staying somewhat constant. They're respectable, and by that we don't mean like they're respected by others or they are respectful to others. It means that they're not chaotic. They're attractional in their personality. They're respectable. They draw people in. We talked about the fact that they were hospitable. Doesn't mean that they love to entertain and have people in their home. It means that they are not that they love strangers. They love everyone. They're like Jesus, where he said, "I must go through Samaria," because there was a woman that everyone else was shunning. In her world personally and in culturally, you had nothing to do with the Samaritans. Jesus was like, hey man, I am phileo xenos. I am a lover of strangers. I'm heading through Samaria because I'm gonna love on the foreigner. And so we see that in terms of what it means to be an elder and a pastor. They're also able to teach. That was what we looked at yesterday, that they are skilled in teaching. They do the work. They don't just pull out a book, hear what somebody else is saying, and make comments. Or they don't just casually read the word and decide, oh, I think I've got this great illustration. It's really going to wow the people. Or I've got this point. When a pastor's message has become more about his statements and his points and they do the word of God, we have a backwoods society. And there's too many times I see people quoting other men. Not that there's not some wisdom in that, but the whole goal of pastoring isn't to be quotable. The whole goal of being a pastor is to expound the Word of God so that people are changed by it, transformed by it, and their lives are better for it, and they're more in line with the holy God. That's the purpose. And so that man is to study, to show himself approved, a workman needing not to be ashamed because he's skilled in his talent, and he slings his hammer well. And that's what it should be. They're not addicted to wine, so they're not controlled by some substance that will lead them astray. They don't become inebriated. They don't become addicted to things. When the only freedom, the only slave they have is Jesus Christ. That's the goal of what it means, in that sense of not addicted to wine. So then we come to the three phrases we're going to look at today. And he says he's not violent, but gentle. So there's that contrast. He's not known as someone who is violent, plektas. It means a bully, right? So if you go somebody, man, he's just a bully. Well, that's a terrible character flaw. And so this is what it's speaking against. It's one, and the term is used in secular areas to mean a brawler. That is one who balls the fist up, is always ready for a blow to hit somebody to do something. Striker is another term. They're quick to strike. Doesn't always mean physical. Sometimes it's the words, but they do that. They're contentious. They're a fighter. They're always arguing about something. This is kind of the way that is. He says they're not that. A good elder is not one who's violent, who's always just looking for a fight. Those guys who feel like the whole world's got them down and they've got to fight and claw. They're not men that you want to follow. This is not that. And so he says, but they're gentle. That's the term we also use. It's translated lots of times in the languages to mean patient. Epiekes, and so it means that they're very patient. They easily pardon human failures, right? This is what that is. Those guys who are rule keepers and they demand that you follow every rule, and when you don't, they just check it off. Those are people who are not gentle, and according to this phrase in the scriptures, it is they don't remember the bad that people do. I love people like this. I appreciate people like this. Those who are going to always remember every wrong that somebody's done, they're not patient and they're not gentle. And so you easily pardon human failure. This is a character. Listen, because if you're not and you've got a bunch of people that you're overseeing, you're going to hate the world if you can't easily forgive and let just things that people do roll off their back. That doesn't mean you're unconcerned about them. Doesn't mean you don't love them. Doesn't mean any of those things. It simply means that you're gracious, right? You're patient with people, understanding, right, that we're growing. As long as we're seeing progress in someone's life, patience should always be there in the case of a leader. In the case of a parent, We just want to see progress. We can't keep pointing out flaws every time somebody does something wrong and go, "Ah, remember when you did this?" And that still bothers me that you said that. That's a person that doesn't know how to just put stuff aside. We got bigger fish to fry, as they say, than those things. Let's just move forward. They're not looking for a fight. Just stop it. Stop looking for a fight. Just be patient with people. Don't be so demanding. These are the kind of bosses that people run from because there's never an encouragement. The morale is always down because it's always this oppressive. Make a mistake and you're going to be punished. It's important that we treat others like Christ treats us. Then he says this: they're not quarrelsome. Amicus, amicable is the word that we get from that, meaning that they're peaceable. They go along and they get along, right? I mean, that's kind of who they are. They're not always arguing. They're not always playing the devil's advocate. It's frustrating to me when I hear people say, "I'm just playing the devil's advocate." Well, you know what? Can we break down that phrase for a minute? I don't want to be anything for the devil. I don't want to be his advocate. That's a terrible phrase to begin with. I'm just playing devil's advocate. I have that happen a lot of times in the business world. You'll hear people as you're brainstorming, let me just play the devil's advocate here for a second. What they mean is, let me just pick a fight. That's what they're saying. Now I realize some actually want to say, hey, let's look at it from another angle. There's nothing wrong with that, right? If the tables were turned, how would you want to be treated? But this whole silliness of just always being quarrelsome, it wears on you, doesn't it? Hey, man, pretty day out. Oh no, man, it's going to rain. It's bad. No, you're right. It's a terrible characteristic and quality. I love how practical Paul is and through the Word of God, inspired by God, to move him in those kind of directions. And then we look at the last one we're going to look at today, and he says he's not a lover of money. So we've seen three things, right? He's not violent, he's not quarrelsome, and he's not a lover of money. That's why I was saying character is often determined by what you're not, more so than what you are. And so what you're not, what he can't be, is a lover of money. That define when you see a man who's not chasing money. Now we all need money to live, and I understand all that. We're all that's a truism. But it's the love of it. It is the chasing of it. He's not a lover of money. Philaguros. It literally means he's not a lover. The A in the Greek, or alpha, means not, right? Phileo, we know what that means. It means brotherly love. And then euros is the word for silver. So he's not a lover of silver. In other words, he's just not chasing that stuff. He's free from materialism. Think about it. Man, if you've got a pastor who's always, got to have the newest toy, the latest thing, and this, that, and the other, it can wear on him. It can begin to affect him because when you start losing those things, it shapes what happens, it's a domino effect. They're not dominated by a desire for financial gain. Listen, if you get in the ministry because you think you can make money in that, that's disgusting, really. I mean, it's just and listen, we've seen that for years on TV. Every one of those freaks and goofballs in the prosperity doctrine that get on TV and brag about how many private jets they've got and all this kind of garbage, that's just theology from hell. It's evil. There's nothing godly about that at all. We're told very plainly by Jesus to treasure up for yourselves treasures in heaven, not on earth where rust and moth can destroy. Now, lest you think I'm talking about you shouldn't have good things, I'm not saying that, but they can't control you. And really, it's a character issue that has to be looked at. Because when this trait is in someone, here's what happens. They become for sale. If you love money, then you become up for sale. You're going to bounce from, this pastor's going to bounce from this church to this church I had a little small church. I would like a little bigger church. I want to get to the great church, right? Because they got all the perks. If that's your goal, it's wrong. There's something totally messed up. You're not qualified to be a leader in that kind of thing. Money's a subtle danger. It's like food, right? We love food. I love food. But if it becomes your God, your stomach becomes your God, it has this totally adverse effect. You get fat, lethargic, lazy. It just happens, right? You wear it, and you can tell. and it's unhealthy. Well, when someone's a lover of money and they begin to be a glutton with that, it begins to weigh him down, and it shows. And it look, bro, you need to get in shape, right? This is that. But like I say, you become for sale, and that's a terrible place to be. Um, I remember John MacArthur telling the story of being in a predicament that he had somewhat put himself in. Uh, he had been invited to go speak at a place, and he turned it down. Well, the guys reached back out and say, "Hey man, listen, we'll give you, I think it was like $5,000. We'll give you $5,000 if you'll just come speak." Well, then he's like, kind of in a predicament. If I say yes, well then the guy's going to know, well, he can be bought. And he said, but I found a lot of money. So to check himself, he told the guy, he said, let's tell you what, I'm gonna come and speak, but and you can pay me the $5,000, but I don't want the $5,000. I've got 3 other like ministries that I want to see taken care of. So if you'll just see to it that those get the money, it'll get me out of it. That way he got to speak. He gained some money that people were willing to give, and he gave it away. And I think what a brilliant kind of strategy. And that's a pastor. That's a man who cares about his reputation. Who says, I don't want to be known as someone who can be bought. I don't want to be known as someone like that. I remember being tested at one of the churches that we were at. I was relatively a new guy, and so one of the leaders of the church came in, wanted to have a conversation with me, sat down, and we started chatting. And he said, "Hey, listen, Pastor, there's a lot of people upset about the way music's going." And back then, man, it was like music was the thing, and I wasn't even controlling anything. I have a hands-off approach. If God's called that person to the ministry to lead worship, I kind of let them do it. So it wasn't my deal. And he said, some of us are going to leave, and we give significant money, but we're going to leave if you don't, fix that. And I remember thinking, man, I've got a problem here, because if I bend to this, they're going to know, kind of like this, they're going to know I'm for sale. And the church is already kind of strapped, not because of I inherited a mess. So I remember saying, well, hey, listen, I appreciate that. And you guys can do what you need to do, but I'm going to let the people that God has placed in positions over there do what they feel led to do. And so that was the end of that. And they eventually left, and we eventually had some money that walked out with them. But I'm still determined that I made the right decision, because you just can't let money control you. It's an evil. It's an evil if we're not careful. Money's great for so many things, but not when it owns you. So hey, that's as far as we're going to be able to get today. Tomorrow we're going to tomorrow we're going to turn our attention to family and his character in that area, and I can't wait to share that with you. Man, love you guys. Have a great day, and Lord bless, and I'll see you tomorrow if the Lord allows.